So we can begin the class. Um, uh, I think from my side, I told you that political ecology was complete. Uh,
Yes, ma'am.
yes. And then I wanted to discuss with all of you historical ecology, right? And the basic concerns of historical ecology. Just a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just a moment.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, Vasundhara.
Ma'am, like after we are through with all our sessions, like will it be okay if I remind you after that for the links of the videos and all that, ma'am? Because
The
I
reason for that is the reason for delay is that I wanted to give you people all the links. I had
yes,
shown
ma'am.
you few other links, but the problem is that now I did not keep a tab of all the videos. I may have it in my history, so I was just trying to compile a list for that also. There weren't many videos, but whatever there were, I wanted to compile a proper list and then upload it, because for ethnography paper also I have uploaded a proper list on each topic if I had shown a video. So
Yes, ma'am.
I remember
Ma'am,
it.
it's not about the delay. It's just that like I don't like I find it bad on my end to keep like reminding of
No, no,
faculty
no.
something
That's
like that.
okay. That's
Yes, ma'am.
okay. No, no issues. You don't have to remind me anymore because I have set a reminder on my own. So,
Okay, ma'am.
okay, I think in a day or two, I think I should be ready with the whole thing. Okay. Or maybe,
Okay, ma'am.
yeah, or maybe at the most, um, I will be ready over the weekend, which is 17th October. So, yeah,
Okay, ma'am.
okay. Anyway, so what was I saying? Yeah, for historical ecology. So I was just saying that for political ecology, one thing that you really need to also have in your mind is the fact that you should be able to understand political ecology from the perspective of obviously the local and global policies, and then you should be able to understand an ecology from the perspective of household, village, and so on, international laws and so on. So these were certain things that you need to understand. You can find your own examples which are specific to communities, and then you can also find examples in the uh, global scenario with regard to, say, United Nations, the way I had shown you people. Okay, so all these categories have to be considered when you are basically studying political ecology. Try to relate them from the micro to macro level and from the household level to a global level. Okay, so those are the examples that you will find, and try to talk about the control of resources, because that is probably the most important um, you know indicator of ecology and political ecology per se. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now we move to historical ecology. Now, the reason why I want you to understand historical ecology is because I keep insisting with everyone, is that historical ecology or history per se is probably the most important thing when you are studying, most important discipline when you are studying social sciences. Okay, and when you are studying social sciences, human ecology specifically, you have to understand that history plays a very significant role. Uh, Understand that historical ecology is quite close to environmental history or landscape history and other fields of cultural geography. Okay, anthropology encourages your engagement in the field of ecology, but historical ecology is that I can say that unique aspect of cultural ecology where you basically try to look at various examples dealing with let's just say how the landscape of a space have has changed over years and over centuries of anthropogenic use, and sometimes we may as well call it misuse. So you have to take into consideration anthropogenic use and misuse of natural resources, and then you have to take into account how that has led to change in the landscape, how that has led to change in the entire geography or topography of a place. Okay, uh, historical ecology takes into account this approach based on few assumptions. The first assumption is that human activity has affected virtually all environments. Okay. The second the second idea is, or the assumption is, that not always has the impact of human activity been considered as something that has degraded the environment. That is, human activity does not always necessarily degrade or improve environment. Okay. The third assumption is different cultural systems have different impacts on the environment. And the fourth or the final assumption is human interaction with the environment can be understood as a phenomena, as a complete phenomena in itself. Is it clear? Yes, students, is it clear to all of you? Students, am I audible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'm yeah, so I'm asking you, is it clear to all of you these four assumptions?
Ma'am, what was
Dipanshi,
the first assumption?
that
Can you repeat that?
yes, Vasundhara, what has happened to Vasundhara? Okay, okay,
And ma'am, yes, all the four assumptions are clear to me. I was just typing, so I couldn't
okay,
answer.
okay, okay. Dipanshi, you did not follow the first assumption. The first assumption is that human activity has affected virtually all environment.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. every time you look at, anyway, so I was just talking about how human activity has affected virtually all the environment. Um, then what happens is that we start considering anthropogenic activities as an indicator of how the environment has changed. And then what happens is something which is very interesting is the human activities become relevant, so relevant that we start feeling that taking care of the environment is also something which is very significant and very important for us, and that we are in many ways the custodians of the environment. Okay, just a moment. Again, sharing with all of you a small video to explain to you the relationship of biodiversity and human activity. Just a moment. Let me know if it is audible and visible to all of you. Is it visible and audible to all of you?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is biodiversity threatened? We're going to talk about something that we'll call local factors, as opposed to more global human effects. But before we go into some of those, we really need to talk about the fact that the human population is growing fast. In 2014, the estimate was just over 7 billion people on Earth. Human population growth is exponential. The more people you have, the more reproduction you have going on. If you have more reproduction happening, then the curve on a graph of population versus time is going to get steeper and steeper and steeper, to the point where we're looking at about 9 billion people by the year 2050. It was Thomas Malthus in 1798 who came up with the concept of carrying capacity. Basically, he said that the Earth can't indefinitely support an ever-increasing human population. That's a concept that to us, I think, seems quite clear, but Malthus was a member of a social force at that time, basically the clergy that felt the Earth was put here for humans to use and upon which we should go forth and multiply. But Malthus was among the first in recognizing that there was no way that human population could increase indefinitely without having some sort of an effect on the environment and the environment's ability to support us. The logic he used led him to the fact that based on the kind of farming he saw around him at the time, there would soon be so many people there wouldn't be enough to eat. Basically, the planet was going to check population growth through famine. He had seen famine. He knew what it was like. So the planet was going to take care of it if we didn't. In other words, we would exceed the planet's carrying capacity for human beings. The question arose, what actually is the carrying capacity of planet Earth for humans? The answer is like most scientific replies, it depends. We haven't hit the Malthusian limit yet because of a very important thing, and that's human technology, the ability to come up with answers to problems that are facing us at almost every turn. In this case, the answers came through science and technology that increased food production. This made it possible for us to get back on the exponential population growth curve and escape Malthus's view of what the upper limits were. In fact, there are some estimates that suggest if we all did with less and lived at the lowest possible level for existence, Earth could support an estimated 40 billion people. But even if we were able to reach a carrying capacity of 40 billion, it would require sacrifices for all humans on Earth, some more than others. It raises a huge question about the quality of life, which points out what's increasingly becoming the single most important fact about human population growth on Earth today, that the world's wealthiest 16% of the people on Earth use 80% of the available resources. The bottom line here, as I say, is that it's complicated. We recognize that the human population is growing. We recognize that resource utilization is much higher in some countries than in others. But what I really want to do is circle back to our primary objective and examine what this really means for biodiversity. If you asked anyone, they'd say it's pretty clear that human population growth and resource utilization have huge effects not just on our social and economic well-being, but of course, on biodiversity. But how exactly? It translates into decreases in species richness. It's primarily through the loss of species richness that our greatest population growth effects are going to show up. If we simplify it, it's as fundamental as no two things can occupy the same place at the same time. That's what we're talking about. If a human is living in a given place, fewer native plants and animals can live there. The details of how human population growth actually affects species richness are only now starting to be worked out. We don't have a lot of data yet. It's a huge, complex problem. One of the pioneering papers on this was published in 2003 by McKee and colleagues. They measured a number of factors in 114 different countries, and what they discovered was that out of all the factors that they looked at, human population growth and species richness were tightly linked. In other words, if you were to slow population growth, that might be sufficient to stop drops in species richness. They suggested that all you need to know is population size. Plug this into the equation and you can figure out in a given place what effect it's going to have on biodiversity. Calculations show that the number of threatened species in an average nation is going to increase 7% by 2020 and 14% by 2050 just based on population growth alone. That's a very simple relationship, but if you open up that box represented by the idea of population growth and unpack what it means, you're talking about lots of human-induced drops in biodiversity. And as usual, things get complicated. I'd say that there are 7 major human-mediated causes of biodiversity loss. They can be grouped into 2 main categories: localized ones and global ones. The global causes we'll look at in separate videos, but for the localized ones, we're going to list 4: land use change, pollution, resource exploitation, and introduction of exotic species. Of course, they overlap a little, but I think for the most part, these are good ways of unpacking our box of problems. Let's start with land use changes. These include things like habitat destruction and conversion of natural habitat to human use that isn't necessarily compatible with the organisms that are native there. This includes crop monoculture that results in a very dramatic drop in species richness in a given habitat. When people think about habitat destruction and conversion, they think of slash and burn agriculture, destroying rainforests, plowing over stuff, or removing the tops of mountains to get at resources like coal. But there are ocean use changes too that I think we should not ignore. Think of coastal wetland loss and mangrove destruction. Urbanization is an enormous change in land use. More people need more homes and more places to work. That in turn requires an expansion of agricultural resources and the spread of those into environments that were previously untouched. It's a very complex problem, as I say, but simply put, the more people you have, the less natural, undeveloped habitat there's going to be. And it's very easy to see how that's linked to a drop in biodiversity. The second local factor is pollution. A lot had been done to bring this subject to people's attention to the point where we think about it as enormous disasters attached to Superfund cleanup sites and such. But there are other, more subtle ways of polluting the environment, which I think are worth thinking about when we talk about drops in biodiversity. For example, the degradation of local habitats through human activities that cause downstream effects, things like the leaching of harmful chemicals from mines into the water table. Waterborne pollutants can pop out in very unusual places and have really big downstream effects, if you'll excuse the pun, on the reproductive viability of organisms that happen to be in those places. There are also dead zones in the ocean caused by nitrogen fertilizers that wash into rivers. Where the rivers flow into the sea, the nitrogen causes blooms of bacteria, which in turn use up the oxygen. Anything that tries to be active in an area where the oxygen is being used up by the bacteria, any oxygen-requiring organism, That is, pretty much any animal, for example, is going to have a really hard time of it. These dead zones are now starting to be a little bit better understood, and it's pretty clear that they're growing in size and in number in relation to population growth. Then there's the overall problem of waste disposal. Untreated sewage is a classic problem for biodiversity. It's not just, of course, human waste. It has to do with sometimes bizarre chemistry involved in the high-tech stuff that we're making now. We're talking about chemical compounds, including drugs and PCBs. There are lots of strange molecules that humans are producing and dumping. In some cases, you get these hormone mimics, simple compounds derived from prescription drugs and other man-made chemicals that get flushed into waterways. Hormone mimics act like naturally occurring hormones that control normal development in wild organisms, particularly water-living ones. Hormone mimics can also adversely affect their reproductive organs, and there are many, many, many examples of this kind of pollution, one that people wouldn't necessarily think of. Another one that doesn't immediately occur to people is noise pollution. Birds in cities are reacting to noise levels. So even the organisms that are not being wiped out because of our expanding cities are starting to adapt to an urban environment by changing their behavior and reproductive patterns. And some of them just can't do it. Noise can also be a major factor in marine mammal survival. Evidence suggests that sonar pollution interferes with the health of marine mammals. Patterns of reproduction can also be upset by our introduction of light pollution to places where there wasn't light before. Sea turtle hatchlings can be impacted by artificial light heading toward it instead of the ocean when they hatch out of their nests on the beach. And bird strikes on buildings are greatly increased at night when the lights are left on. Let's look at the third local factor, resource exploitation. This gets to the simple idea that humans are always using things from their environment. We are inextricably linked to that environment, and we use up stuff. We always have. We have to do that in order to stay alive. There are classic ways we use resources like hunting, cutting down forests for firewood and lumber. Where does the biodiversity go then? A big one for me as a marine scientist, of course, is fishing. We talk about the harvest of fish, but it's not really a gathering of what one sows, it's really a straight-up removal of a resource, as much as mining is. There are attempts to control overfishing, but to a large extent we often don't have enough data to know just what a sustainable amount of extraction is until it's too late. Before we were moved to action, for example, the cod fishery had collapsed on the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. Today we have no idea what the long-term effect of huge trawls scraping over the sea bottom will be. Now countries are pushing to fish more in the Antarctic, which is a problem because fish, like most things there, grow slowly in the cold Antarctic depths. The last local cause of reduction in species richness I want to mention is the introduction of exotic species, and we'll talk about those in the next video. So just to bring it all back to this concept of carrying capacity, the emerging message is that if everyone on Earth can manage to do more with less, especially in places where we presently use up relatively so much more, we might be on track towards a more manageable carrying capacity for humans on Earth with a decent quality of life. In our world of finite resources, it's a balancing act between humans and every other species on Earth. And we have to learn to do more with less to keep that natural balance, the natural species richness, the biodiversity that keeps ecosystems and therefore all of nature, including ourselves, healthy.
Okay. So could you follow it, everyone? That and there is a list of range of anthropogenic activities that have had an impact. Obviously, this was a video that was in many ways dedicated to the impacts that degrade the environment. However, you need to understand that the degrading effect of human activity is not the only impact that humans are capable of. there have been many spaces where people have actually introduced some really key environmental changes which have been constructive for the environment. So after a point, it is their action that matters rather than the you can say whether it is constructive or whether it is destructive. Are you getting my point, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Very small two clips. Again, I want you to see. Um there's something which you really need to see again, just to sort of tell you. Just a moment. Okay, so as you can see, I have shown you the contrast. I've shown you a 12-minute documentary about how degrading can be the impacts of human activities, and I also showed you some few examples. These are not all the examples. There are many such people who have been actually constructing and reconstructing the natural structure of a place. But know this, that it will not never remain the same as it was in the pristine condition when no humans had walked into that place. Now, as I told you, these are the four primary assumptions that have been placed in historical ecologists. Now, historical ecologists, like other ecologists, have paid a lot of attention to small scale societies and their environments. As I told you, and I think you have studied in anthropology for a long time now, that the small scale societies or the traditional societies were considered to be primitive and savages, and these people were considered, to several anthropologists, these people were considered as part of nature, more nature rather than culture. And it was for this reason that their interaction with nature was considered to be more well rounded and more animal like rather than our interaction as part of the mainstream society. Now, historical ecology focuses on the change, on the contingent actions and human agencies in terms of what people decide to do with their environment as part of cultural ecology, as part of historical ecology within cultural ecology. So they don't want to see the impact of marriage, they don't want to see the impact of economy, they don't want to see the impact of politics in ecology. They want to see the change that human agency has been able to reach without any intervention. What is your first instinct, and how is that instinct going to have an impact on the environment, on the ecology of a place, is something which has been of interest to historical ecologists. Yes, Vasundhara.
Ma'am, can you give a brief example of the impact of the institution of marriage on ecology?
By marriage, I mean any institution. I don't just mean specifically marriage. But yes, ecological symbols can be seen even in case of marriage. I don't know how closely are you associated with the whole idea of marriages in rural areas. But if you were to see marriages in rural area, then you will see so many ecological symbols, and how each ecological element plays a significant role in the rituals of marriage, and how that water is significant, especially a natural source of water is very significant in rural areas for few ritual performances of marriage. Then there is significance of tree that you will see. Traditional agrarian societies are known to sow seeds every time rituals are performed, and therefore there is constant interaction with ecological elements and human beings in this particular ritual. Okay. How do I show you an example? Just a moment. I can't possibly right now tell you, but um, not right now. But then I have had the privilege of attending some unique weddings of people of various cultures, and I have seen that natural elements have always been a part of those ritual performances and ceremonies that are you know reaching the main ceremony of marriage, so main ritual of marriage. Right before that, I've seen people plowing their field and sowing seeds in specific spot and hiding those seeds, and married women assembling around it. I've seen people going early in the morning to water sources, taking the bride to be and groom to be to perform specific rituals. And these rituals are again very specific rituals that have the ability to actually change the face of the flora and fauna around us. Okay. the same elements find mention even when you will see that the new bride, when she walks into these houses, she used traditional colors and imprints her hand outside the door, and these doors have symbols of trees and animals that symbolize fertility of the mother earth. So ecological elements and ecological relationship that we share even during these rituals and ceremonies is something that you will find expressed in various you know communities in various regions. Okay, if I find some pictures, I may be able to tell you better, Vasundhara. I may be able to
Mom,
explain
can
it
I
to you.
just take an example? Like,
Yes.
I remember watching his movie. Like, as you were speaking, I was recalling, like, there was this function of wedding in that movie only. And before, I think it was some South Indian community, I don't remember. And before, like, the wedding, like, sort of to give an indication, like, in our like in Delhi and all these metropolitan cities, people just decorate their houses with lights and all to sort of indicate that ye like this is ye shadi ka ghar hai. As but they what they did before the wedding to sort of indicate that a girl is going to be married in this house, they like they they like sort of planted an already grown, like a germinated tree. I don't know, I don't remember which tree it was. Like, it was already growing, but they planted that tree right in the middle, like what we call a veranda. They planted that in the front side of like in the outside their house, but like a very big field they had outside of the house. I'm not able to explain it. There
You
was
can just
like
call
they
it a
had this very.
courtyard or the porch. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The courtyard. So they just planted that in the very middle of that, so to indicate that
Symbolizing the
now the
union.
girl. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am. Yes,
symbolizing
ma'am.
the union.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I understand. So that's what I'm saying, that you will find if that's why I said I don't know how many of you go back to villages, how many of you go back to attend village weddings. Yes, Dipanshi.
Ma'am, I've seen this ritual in Priyanka's house where there is a very important role of Tulsi while having a wedding, especially when there is a wedding of a when you are from side of a girl.
Hmm.
So if Priyanka want to elaborate, she can about this example.
Okay.
I don't know much about it.
Okay. Um, Priyanka is there, but we have just about 5 minutes to complete this class. Maybe Priyanka can share this skull again. Tomorrow we have a class at 9:15. My whole point was that you will see um, these ecological elements indicated in symbolic forms. Um, just a moment. Just a moment. Just give me a moment. I'm just trying to see. If you go to country weddings also, in Christian um, countries also, you will find traditionally natural elements, and I'm talking about old times. You will find natural elements being symbolized in some form or the other and being expressed there. Um, Somehow I can't find it right now. I'll try to find it maybe tomorrow. I'll see if I can show you some, you know, imprints of examples, these examples, which I may have. And you'll be able to understand what I mean, how ecology is almost always ingrained within the whole idea of weddings and marriage rituals. And especially in agrarian societies. So you will find specific rituals in UP, in Bihar, in Punjab, Haryana. Uh, you know, um, you will find a significance of rice in Bengal, paddy in Bengal, in marriage ceremony, and specific division between sacred rice and the one which will be considered as normal. You go to Kerala, you'll again find, like I often give you the example of fish in Bengali wedding being very relevant because fish symbolizes the ecology of that region. So I hope, Vasundhara, I have clarified this. Tomorrow I will continue this discussion further,
Okay, ma'am.
and I will be able to complete historical ecology. I think tomorrow itself, and we can then just have a brief question and answer, and then one thing that would be left would be applied anthropology in ecology, and we'll discuss that maybe tomorrow or maybe on Saturday, because this Saturday the timetable would be of Tuesday. So maybe on Saturday, 9:15 class. We'll see. Okay. So anyway, I'm stopping here and we shall continue this discussion tomorrow. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
welcome.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.